Hey everyone, and welcome back. So today we are diving into the world of generative AI, but with a bit of a twist.
A twist?
Yeah. You guys shared an article with us called "What Are 11 Limitations of Generative AI?" And I thought that'd be really interesting to get beyond all the hype,
Right.
and really kind of dig into some of those I don't know, quirks that make it so interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of like you get this powerful sports car, right?
Oh,
It's thrilling, but if you don't really understand how to handle it, you might end up in a ditch.
I like that analogy. Okay, so first up, this article talks about a lack of human contextual understanding, which
Right.
I can kind of grasp conceptually, but can you give us an example?
Sure. So imagine you're using an AI for like legal research,
Okay.
and it spits out a case citation that sounds totally legit.
Okay.
But the thing is, that case doesn't exist.
What?
Yeah, the AI essentially hallucinated it.
You're making stuff up.
Basically, yeah, by prioritizing like a plausible sounding output over actual facts.
Right. That is I mean, especially in a legal context, that is terrifying.
Totally. And that's a key difference, I think, between AI and like your traditional search engines.
Mm-hmm.
Search engines like point you to sources.
Right.
AI can actually generate information that like sounds right, but isn't grounded in reality.
Okay, so how does that happen, this hallucination thing? I mean,
Yeah.
is it trying to mislead us on purpose?
Oh, no, not intentionally. It's more about like how these models are actually trained.
Okay.
They learn to predict the most likely like next word or phrase based on huge amounts of data they've processed.
Okay.
But that doesn't necessarily guarantee accuracy.
It's like that overeager student who tries to impress the teacher with a clever answer, even if it's not totally correct.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's why like fact checking is so important when you're working with AI generated content,
Absolutely.
especially in fields where accuracy is super important.
Mhm. Especially in legal advice, I am double checking for sure.
Okay.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. The article also mentions this heavy reliance on training data.
hmm
What's the big deal about that?
So think of training data like the foundation of a house.
Okay.
If it's shaky or if it's built on like uneven ground, the whole structure is compromised.
Right.
Same with AI.
Mm.
If the data is flawed, if it's biased, if it's incomplete, the AI's output will reflect those shortcomings.
So it's not just about the quantity of the data, but the quality of the data too?
Precisely. And this is where it gets kind of tricky.
Yeah.
Even with massive data sets, right? Ensuring
Yeah.
they're like representative, unbiased, free from harmful content. It's a huge challenge.
Oh, yeah. It's like sifting through all the sand on a beach to find those perfect grains for your sandcastle.
Haha, that's a good one.
Mm.
And this actually brings us to another fascinating aspect of AI. Its inability to truly process real-time information.
Okay, so it can't predict the future. So no lottery numbers then. Huh.
Not that simple.
Okay.
Remember, AI is trained on static data, a snapshot of the world at a particular time.
Mm-hmm.
So it can analyze trends and make predictions based on historical patterns, but it can't factor in real-time updates or like events that we didn't see coming.
So asking it to predict the stock market is like using yesterday's weather report to plan a picnic today.
Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You might get lucky, but there's a good chance you might get caught in the rain.
Yeah. So it's not a crystal ball, but more like a powerful but slightly outdated map.
Very apt comparison, and it highlights another limitation, the computational and environmental costs
Oh, right.
of training these massive AI models.
Yeah.
It's not just a mental workout for computers, it's a huge energy drain.
Wait, so my AI-powered chatbot is contributing to climate change.
Not directly,
Hmm.
but the training process for large AI models
Oh, okay.
can consume as much energy as like multiple households in a year.
Wow.
It's something to think about.
Yeah, that's pretty mind-blowing. It makes you realize that AI development isn't just about algorithms and data, it's also about infrastructure and
Mhm.
responsible resource management.
For sure. Speaking of resource management, let's talk about AI's inability to really grasp physical and sensory experiences.
Ooh, okay, this is where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, can AI actually describe the taste of a perfectly ripe mango or the feeling of sand between your toes?
That's the thing. AI can process words and images related to those sensations,
Right.
but it can't experience them the way we do.
Right.
It's like reading a recipe versus actually tasting a dish.
Okay, yeah.
You get the information, but not the full sensory experience.
Right. So those AI travel blogs might describe a beautiful sunset, but They can't capture the actual, like, feeling of awe when you see it firsthand.
Exactly. It's a difference between knowledge and experience.
Yeah.
And that gap in understanding has like big implications for how we use and interpret AI-generated content.
Okay, so I'm starting to see the bigger picture. AI is amazing at processing information, but it's still fundamentally limited by its inability to, like, understand the world the way we do.
Absolutely. You're getting it.
Yeah.
And this leads us to another fascinating limitation.
Okay.
The challenges AI faces with long-form content coherence.
Okay.
So it can generate these like short bursts of creative text,
Yeah.
but things get a lot trickier with longer pieces.
It's like it has a great opening act, but it kind of loses steam by the time the curtain falls.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It can kind of mimic like the style of a famous novelist,
Yeah.
but it can't maintain a plot,
Right.
character development, the emotional depth of like a human-written story.
So you're saying my AI assistant can write a catchy email subject line, but maybe not my memoir.
Haha, probably not yet.
Okay.
It highlights like a fundamental difference, I think, in how humans and AI approach creativity and storytelling.
Okay. This is also fascinating, I have to say, but it's also a bit daunting. It's like we're
Yeah.
peeling back the layers of an onion, revealing more complexity with each layer.
Right, there's always another layer.
Yeah.
But for now, let's take a break and let these insights sink in.
Okay.
We'll continue our deep dive in the next segment.
Sounds good.
That's a great way to put it. Peeling back the layers of an onion.
Right.
And you're right, there's so much more to uncover.
Yeah.
You know, before we dive back into those limitations, I think it's important to remember that even with all these quirks, generative AI is already like woven into our lives.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, from those chatbots that pop up on websites to like those personalized recommendations you get when you're shopping online, it feels like AI is working behind the scenes everywhere you look.
Exactly. And that's why it's even more important to understand its limits, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need to be informed users, aware of its potential, but also its pitfalls.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's continue unpacking these limitations then.
Okay.
You mentioned that AI struggles with long-form content.
Right.
Can you expand on that? Like, why is that?
Sure. So think about how AI learns.
Okay.
It's fed tons of data, right?
Yeah.
And it learns to identify patterns and mimic styles.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to long-form content, like let's say a novel or a research paper, it's not just about stringing together like grammatically correct sentences.
Right. It needs like a cohesive narrative,
Exactly.
a sense of flow and purpose that goes beyond just generating the next word.
Right. It's like the difference between a robot assembling furniture
Okay.
versus like a craftsman building a bespoke piece.
Okay.
The robot can follow instructions,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't have the intuition or the artistic vision
Right.
to create something truly unique.
Okay. That makes sense. So if I wanted to use AI to help me write a novel, let's say, what should I keep in mind?
I would say think of it as a collaborative tool.
Okay.
So it can help you generate ideas,
Mm-hmm.
overcome writer's block, maybe even suggest different plot twists.
Right.
But you, as the author, you need to kind of guide the process.
Yeah.
Make sure the story stays consistent, engaging, and like true to your vision.
So it's like having a writing partner who is great at brainstorming, but maybe needs a little bit of direction when it comes to like the finer points of storytelling.
Exactly. It emphasizes that need for human oversight and judgment, I think, when you're working with AI.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so collaboration is key, but let's go back to those hallucinations we talked about earlier.
Right.
How do those impact like our trust in the content that AI is generating?
It's a big question, right?
Yeah.
When AI confidently presents information that turns out to be false,
Yeah.
it erodes our trust, not only in that specific output, but potentially in like AI systems as a whole.
It's like being told a convincing lie by a friend.
Yeah.
Even if they apologize later, it can be hard to fully trust them again.
That's a great way to put it. And it raises questions about how we can like design AI systems that are more transparent
Right.
and accountable
Yeah.
systems that can kind of explain their reasoning and allow us to trace back their like decision-making process.
So we need to be able to understand like how the AI got to that conclusion
Yeah,
and not just accept it at face value.
exactly. It's like having a calculator that shows its work,
Okay.
not just the final result.
That makes sense. Yeah, transparency builds trust, especially when you're dealing with something as complex as this, which
Right.
we don't fully understand. Okay, let's shift gears again. We were talking about AI's inability to experience the world through our senses. How does that limitation then impact how we interact with this AI-generated content?
Think about it this way. AI can analyze data about a beautiful landscape, a delicious meal,
Right.
a moving piece of music, let's say.
Yeah.
But it can't grasp the subjective experience of those things.
Yeah.
The emotional resonance that they evoke in us as humans.
So even if it can describe a sunset in like really eloquent language,
Yeah.
it doesn't understand that feeling of awe that a sunset can inspire.
Exactly. And that gap in understanding is important to keep in mind when you're consuming AI-generated content. It
Right.
can be informative, it can be entertaining,
Yeah.
but it's important to remember that it's filtered through this lens that lacks our human capacity for subjective experience.
Okay, I'm seeing a theme here.
Yeah.
It's like AI is this incredibly powerful tool for processing information and generating content, but it's still fundamentally limited by its inability to like truly understand the world the way we do.
You got it. And that brings us to this crucial question.
Okay.
How do we address this fundamental limitation?
Yeah, are researchers working on giving AI like a sense of subjective experience?
That is like the million-dollar question in AI research right now.
Yeah.
Some researchers are exploring the potential of incorporating sensory data into training models.
Okay.
Others are trying to develop algorithms that can simulate human emotions and responses.
So instead of just feeding it data about the physical world, they're trying to give it a way to experience that world.
Exactly, at least in a simulated way.
Yeah.
It's super fascinating, also super challenging.
Yeah.
And it remains to be seen how successful these efforts will be.
Right.
But even if AI never fully replicates human consciousness, understanding its limitations is so important for developing and using it responsibly.
Okay, so while like a truly sentient AI might be a long way off,
Yeah.
it's still important to be aware of how these limitations impact like our interactions with current AI systems.
For sure. And this brings us to another limitation that we need to discuss, the potential for bias in AI systems.
Okay, this is something that I've heard a lot about, but can you explain why AI is susceptible to bias in the first place?
So remember, AI learns from data,
Right.
and a lot of that data is collected from the real world,
Yeah.
which, as we know, is full of biases and inequalities. So if the data reflects those biases, the AI is going to learn and perpetuate them.
It's like teaching a child to speak using only books written by authors from a single culture.
Yeah.
They might become fluent, but their understanding of the world will be limited by that like narrow perspective.
Exactly. It shows how important it is to carefully curate and evaluate the data we're using to train these models.
Yeah.
We have to make sure it's representative, it's diverse, it's free from harmful stereotypes.
So it's not just about feeding it tons of data, it's about making sure that data reflects the complexity and diversity of the real world.
You got it. And that's a constant challenge.
Right.
Even with the best intentions.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
It's hard to completely eliminate bias from data sets.
Yeah.
It requires us to be vigilant, think critically, and be willing to constantly evaluate and adjust our approaches.
So it's like a never-ending game of whack-a-mole, trying to like identify and mitigate these biases as they pop up.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
And it needs a multidisciplinary approach,
Yeah.
Not just computer scientists, engineers, but social scientists, ethicists, experts in diversity and inclusion.
So it takes a village to build responsible AI.
Couldn't agree more. And it's a village we all need to be part of.
Yeah.
Whether you're developing it, using it every day, or just talking about it, its implications for society.
Okay, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, but in a good way.
Yeah.
It's like you've opened my eyes to a whole new dimension of AI here.
That's what we're here for. And there's even more to explore.
Okay.
But I think for now, let's pause here and pick up where we left off in the next segment.
Sounds good. All right, so we are back and ready to kind of continue our deep dive into these limitations of generative AI. And I have to say, this whole conversation has really like shifted my perspective.
Oh, yeah.
I used to think of AI as this almost magical thing,
Right.
But now I'm kind of seeing it more as like a powerful tool, but with its own set of like quirks and challenges.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
It is easy to get caught up in all the hype, but understanding the limitations, I think, of any technology is so important if you want to use it responsibly.
Absolutely.
And speaking of limitations,
Yeah.
there's one we haven't talked about directly yet. AI's dependence on the infrastructure that powers it.
Oh, you're talking about those like computational environmental costs that we touched on earlier.
Exactly.
Yeah, the energy and resources needed to train and run these massive AI models.
Yeah, it's like building a rocket ship without considering the fuel it needs to launch into space.
Ooh.
We can marvel at the engineering, but if it can't get off the ground, it's not very useful.
Right. So are you saying that like our current infrastructure might not even be able to handle the growing demands of AI?
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
As these AI models become more complex and data intensive,
Hmm.
the energy consumption and environmental impact, those will increase.
Right.
And if we don't address those, they could become pretty major roadblocks to progress and
Wow.
ethical use of AI.
So it's not just about making AI smarter and more capable,
Hmm.
but also making it more sustainable
Yes,
in terms of its resource consumption.
absolutely. We need to think about the whole life cycle of these systems,
Okay.
from the energy used to train them to the resources needed to deploy and maintain them.
So what are some of the solutions out there? I mean, can we make AI more energy efficient?
Researchers are working on that.
Okay.
Some are focused on new hardware architectures that are optimized for AI workloads,
Okay.
while others are looking into algorithms that can achieve the same level of performance, but with less computational power.
So we kind of need like a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's not just about technical solutions.
Okay.
It's also about things like policy changes, industry standards, even shifts in user behavior to really promote those more sustainable AI practices.
It sounds like a really complex challenge,
It is,
but one that is definitely worth tackling if we want to harness the power of AI in a way that benefits everyone,
for sure.
humanity and the planet.
Couldn't agree more. And it's one that needs collaboration across so many fields:
Yeah,
computer science, engineering, environmental science, policy, ethics.
it really does take a village, huh?
It does.
Okay, so we've covered a lot today.
A lot.
From AI's inability to understand like human context and experience,
Mm,
to those potential biases it can pick up, to the environmental costs associated with it.
yeah. And we didn't even get to all of them.
Right, it's a lot to take in.
It is.
But the big takeaway for me, at least, is that while generative AI has a lot of potential, we need to approach it with a critical eye,
Absolutely.
aware of both its strengths and its limitations.
I think that's the best way to go forward with any new technology.
Yeah, it's like we're at the very beginning of a new era here,
Yeah.
and we're all still figuring out how to navigate this like totally uncharted territory.
And the choices we make now will shape the course of that journey for sure.
Well said. This has been incredibly insightful.
It's been fun.
I feel like I have a much better understanding of generative AI now, not just what it can do, but like the questions that we need to be asking,
I think that's important.
as we continue to develop it
Yeah.
and interact with it. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this exploration.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
And a huge thank you to all of you for listening. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the limitations of generative AI. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep learning.